And we're live. Thank you for joining us today. We're broadcasting live from historic Founders Park in Ocean Grove, New Jersey, on the Jersey Shore. And we're delighted you can join us today for Music Matters 2020. On our new and unique podcast community, we discuss what's going on in the classical music world as seen through the eyes of distinguished colleagues. Today we have a wonderful show with a wonderful mezzo-soprano, Maya Hoover, who's a voice professor and a real just a terrific force and doing some wonderful work throughout the United States and also in South America. And we're delighted that she can join us today. Thank you for being here today. Remember to subscribe to us as we are a growing community. Hit that bell for the most up-to-date information on upcoming guests and topics. You can check out our website for our complete listing of upcoming shows and our library of past episodes at jasontramm.net. So thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome Maya Hoover.
Thanks, it's so great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So you are our first guest dialing in from Hawaii. So what's the weather like in Hawaii today?
It's perfect. Blue skies, blue oceans, couple of beautiful clouds. Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's hot, but not as hot as the East Coast, I think.
Yeah, we had 100 yesterday. Today is in the high 80s, but it's a relative cool streak after yesterday.
Right. It must feel good after 3 digits.
It's
right.
Wonderful. So tell me about your journey as an artist. I know you've sung a lot of opera. You're also very involved with art song, especially art song of Spanish composers from Latin and South America. And so you've done so much interesting repertoire. Tell me about your journey as an artist. Where did you start singing?
Well, it depends on who you ask. If you ask my father, who that I always was. And in fact, the first recording I think I have, he would record me on cassette tape. So I have a couple of things from when I was about 3. My repertoire was a little different then. But he encouraged me to sing, and he recorded it. I still have it. And I was very involved in musical theater as a child, and a lot of people don't know this, but I always loved music, but I really identified as a dancer because I wasn't one of those belter star kids. So I could sing in tune, it was kind of sweet, but, I never got the big singing roles, always, the dancing ones. And that was really my start in music. Still working on that. When I entered high school, I joined the choir. And my freshman year, I went to the first rehearsal. I was so overwhelmed by what was happening around me because that first year we were doing, I think it might have been Mid-America or DCI-NY, one of those, singing at Lincoln Center. And so that was my introduction to classical music, right? Come in and be good because we're going to Lincoln Center. And I almost quit after the first week. Thank God I didn't. So my start in classical music was in choir. And I've always been grateful for that. And I had some wonderful, wonderful teachers. And one person in particular who may or may not be watching, somebody named Gene Miller, some shouting out to you, Gene, who was at that point the superintendent of schools for the county. And he came in one rehearsal, and at a certain point he just stopped and he looked at me and said, you're really talented. And I never knew that until that moment. And so in many ways it was that thought that planted a little seed that thought, well, maybe I can just get better and just can, keep going.
It's amazing what those people who encourage us on the way, how important that is. And as an educator now, isn't it amazing the effect we can have on that next generation of people who are up and coming? I love doing high school clinics, and I love working with younger people just to make those connections.
Yeah, and I actually realized, I don't nearly do enough of that. And I have been a bit removed from that age for a while, and then one of my colleagues took me on a couple of recruiting trips, and I sang for these high schoolers. You go in and you think, well, what are they going to think of opera? But they loved it.
I'm always so amazed in America. Like your experience is so important for American singers. Getting exposed through musical theater and choir is the pathway for so many of us, me included. I was a singer, and coming through musical theater and coming through choral music.
Yeah.
I didn't know much about opera until I was in college already, and then someone pushed me, said, "You're a tenor. You should definitely put your voice in that direction." But without the right people mentoring me, I would never have known where to go. And it's amazing what people can do, good mentors. Now, you've had a lot of voice teachers in your travels. I see some prestigious names on that list, like Virginia Zayani and one of the dear friends of our show, Andrea Del Giudice, who's on here a couple of weeks ago. And so, what have you learned? What are some of the things you've learned from your mentors?
I've had one voice teacher for every basic stage of my voice. My first voice teacher transitioned me, helped me prepare for college auditions. My undergraduate teacher was Mary Burgess, and she had a big job because she was the one who had to convince me that vibrato was good. Actually, a little bit the one that came before her too, but she had to deal with the 18 to 21-year-old me. But she was a wonderful teacher, a wonderful technician. And then I had a little bit of time off. I always tell my students, and I don't mind saying this, that along the way I tried to quit music about every 6 months. So, it can get disheartening, but I was fortunate enough to study with Laura Brooks-Rice at Westminster Choir College, and she, again, further transitioned me, built on what was already there, and then with Patricia Hebronic at Indiana University. The woman is a saint. Anyone who knows her will confirm that, and she's a wonderful teacher. And then when I finished school and I started teaching, I was really unhappy with the way that I was singing. So I said, well, I talked to Mrs. Hebronic about it, and she kind of brought up Miss Zayani, and it's kind of a scary prospect. So I said, well, if there's anyone who's going to be honest and say, just stop singing, it's going to be her. So I was living in Atlanta, I flew down to her house in West Palm Beach. Kind of didn't really know each other except for passing in the hallway. And I stayed in her house for a week and took care of little house things and worked with her every day. And she basically kind of revived my voice and my spirit. And it was at that time that I transitioned, to mezzo, because I had started as a soprano. And then, of course, in 2013, I met Andrea Del Giudice, who changed my life. But the one thing that I learned overall is that each of these, I was very fortunate because each of these teachers were wonderful. And they gave me 100% of what they knew. And I never had to undo. I could always build on. And one thing that I've always tried to impart to my students is that we are a tapestry, and I think a lot of people can resent former voice teachers. Well, they didn't bring me to this point where you did, or, I didn't get this. But I really like to think about it, and certainly there are cases like that, but I really like to think about it as something that's built. And if you can respect what each teacher gives you, those are building blocks. And then you become a better artist, a better singer, and ultimately a better teacher if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to watch, to think of the mentors we have at different points in our life. And when you get to a certain stage in your career, you look back and you say, wow, each one was there at the right time to kind of give me what I needed at that moment. And if it was out of order, it probably wouldn't be nearly as effective.
I totally agree. And each one gave me a very specific gift, So I feel very fortunate.
Now you have such an interesting breadth of repertoire, of course, in the opera and the concert repertoire. You do all the mezzo roles, and you have an interesting repertoire there. But tell us about your unique delve into South American and Spanish repertoire.
Well, it's kind of an interesting start because, I always loved the repertoire, And I had some friends from Spain in my undergrad who introduced me to Spanish repertoire, and they said, you know, they were pianists, and we used to do the repertoire together. And they said, you know, you really get this music. You really have an understanding. So it sort of started with Spain, and then when I went to Westminster Choir College, I met Jose Melendez, who is my musical partner, also my best friend, one of my favorite humans on the planet. And we've been friends for 24 years. And it started with one song by Guastavino. And it snowballed. And my master's recital was half Italian repertoire and half Spanish language repertoire. Because at that time I was doing a lot of Italian song as well. And then when I went to do my doctorate, I was actually walking down two major dissertation or culminating project paths. My original dissertation topic was the Holocaust in 20th century American art song. And I was also writing about Latin American art song in my music education philosophy seminar. And my research director, Estelle Jorgensen, another one of my great inspirations and saviors. Actually, it was a lunch with Estelle Jorgensen and my father. My father's a retired early childhood education professor. And it was an intervention of sorts. And she said to me, you know, you've done so much writing on Latin American music, and you know so much about this. She said, why don't you just stay on that path? And my father said, yeah, he said, finish your degree and then change the world. You can explore all of these topics later. So I did, and one of my doctoral recitals was all Latin American, and I flew Jose out to play it because it had to be done, right? He is absolutely my partner in crime, and another friend of mine also from Puerto Rico who's a wonderful guitarist. So the three of us put together this recital. There were instrumentalists, there was dancing. I danced in this thing. Oh. I did this, and I didn't tell Mrs. Hebronic until the dress rehearsal. Thought she was going to kill me, but she didn't because she's kind. Thank you. But yeah, so just to say that it snowballed. It absolutely snowballed, and then of course that led to my going to South America, and then that all led to my compiling it all into an annotated catalog with the help of some really wonderful scholars from all over the world. Although I have to say that writing a book as a junior faculty member is not advisable.
That's an amazing achievement.
It's not advisable.
I didn't realize you wrote that book, and when I was at Hawaii, yeah. I was just amazed that you did, because knowing that must have taken years to compile all and to make the connections with scholars.
It was a very difficult thing to do because it's data, and you can't get everything right. As one of my friends who's written many books that like this calls them gremlins, right? The little things that sneak in, and no matter how many sets of eyes you have, or you know how many times you fact check, when you have thousands and thousands of pieces of data, you're going to miss something. And so for somebody like me, that drives me nuts. But you know, the reason that I wrote the book was to be helpful. So, you know, I'm just the one that had the patience to sit down and put it all together. It was all pre-existing information, right? It's just I gathered it.
Do you assign your students a lot of some of this repertoire so they can like make it live on?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in fact, I teach a coaching class with the wonderful Jonathan Korth, who we just heard in the beginning. And we always dedicate a couple of weeks to Spanish language repertoire, right? So, yeah, I think it's very important to put it into the canon and make it a part of our norm. It's incredible music, and it's valuable, and it's beautiful, and there's something for everyone. So for me, I want anyone who comes to, the University of Hawaii, or anyone who studies with me will have that as part of their daily bread, so to speak. That's part of it for me. That's part of my curriculum.
What advice do you have for maybe some young people who are on the call? We have a lot of younger singers and artists who are just starting their career and their journey in music. What do you have for them on exploring like different repertoire? Like everyone's going to study their Italian opera and their German art song leader and French chanson, but what advice do you have for people on different repertoire sources?
Well, my advice is to be curious. My advice is to know that everything is out there and anything's possible. Also, if you find repertoire that you love, take it to your teacher. Your teacher might not know that it exists. Make sure it's right for you and where you are in your learning, of course, but don't let anyone tell you no. Go explore. The whole world is at your fingertips now. So
isn't it amazing when you and I were in school? I remember actually having records and like having to go check out records and drop. Yeah. We actually had drop the needle exam, like actually drop the needle on the record. Students, I tell my students they look like I'm a dinosaur.
Well, I had to explain what drop the needle meant. They didn't know recently. I was like, well, what? Yeah, I can only imagine what they thought I was talking about, but
Well, the audio files are making a huge comeback. I had just gotten rid of thousands of records I've been collecting of operas and that I've had, and I got rid of all of them. I gave them to a couple collectors, and because I had Spotify and I have it all right there, and it doesn't take up an entire room in my house. And then my son started bringing home vinyl again because he discovered recordings on record players.
That's neat. Well, you know what? We've lost a lot of the language associated with that. Drop the needle, right? B-side. Remember the B-side of things?
Yep.
So
it's amazing to contemplate how the recording industry has shaped classical music and what we what we envision sound of classical music as, and how it shaped performance practice. Actually.
Yeah. What was your first classical music recording?
Oh boy. I think it was Schubert's Erlkönig. It was a recording of Schubert, and probably I must have played the Erlkönig 100,000 times. I was a sophomore in high school, and I had to memorize the poem "Wer reitet so spät durch Nacht und Wind" for my German class, and that piece just fired me up. And I can still, from memory, recite that poem. And then to listen to how Schubert at 17 set that poem blew my mind, and it still blows my mind. And it lit a fire under me, and I've always loved to sing lieder, and I found the association with my heritage very powerful, and just his connection of poetry to music is just so organic and easy. It just grabbed me. How about you?
Yeah, I'm not sure what I don't know that I had any on record, but my first CD was the Christopher Hogwood recording of the Mozart Requiem. Sure. With Emma Kirkby.
Great voice.
says a lot. So, imagine my surprise when I learned there were other ways that the Mozart Requiem actually ended. But yeah, I used to listen to that on full blast.
Isn't it funny how we associate the recordings with like for you it's going to be the mezzo. For me it would be the Francesco Arezzi, the version of the Mozart Requiem that I grew up with as my first, and that set the template in my mind, the earliest template of what that piece is to me. And then I had to unlearn that and form my own opinions. I've conducted it at least 15 times, but it's just one of those pieces. It just changes as you grow up.
It's so true. And I think that I may never be that person that gets into digital scores because I love the physical. I love the physical score because, you get this flimsy little piece of paper with some marks on it, right? And then I always imagine if you turn it this way, then what you find the depth, right? And the layers that you uncover as you begin to study it, and then the layers you add to it as you begin to perform it. And that's something that I just love, the physicality of a score for that reason. Obviously, those layers should still be there with digital score, but for me, it's such a powerful
And
reminder.
maybe the next generation, because they've grown up with the technology and they can maybe seamlessly fuse with it. Yeah, for me, it's the same. My happy place as a conductor is my studio, where I've got piles of music, like literally piles of music. And I have to say, this is what I have coming up in the next 2 months, or before COVID at least. This is what I had coming up
Yeah,
that I
right.
have to conduct rehearsals of very soon. So I would,
Yeah.
and a lot of it I've conducted before at this point in my career, but I love to find, when I program concerts, I always do at least 50% new music that I've never touched, composers I've never done, new pieces. I love to commission and be involved in that. And just and then to spend time. I'm a night owl, so I'm up at 2, 3 in the morning, just tearing apart scores, looking at orchestration, looking for tendencies, retranslating the words, and that layer upon layer until you know it, until I've got something, I've got an opinion on each phrase. That's what's exciting to me as an artist, is that layering and how the dots and dashes and the ink on the page can turn into magic.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, the poetry of it all, literally and figuratively, because there are some poems that I've known for 20 years that now, where I am in my life and everything that I've been through, I feel it differently. And I understand it differently. And it's sure you can do all of the academic study and, well, this poet represented this and they were clearly using this metaphor, but getting that intellectually and then transferring that into the colors of your voice and peppering it with emotion and allowing yourself to be vulnerable to those emotions vocally. um, it's such a process that can change over time, and you can just you really can evolve with a poem, or you can grow with a poem, I think.
Yeah, my first voice teacher gave me some advice that's always stuck with me. She was a wonderful soprano in her day. And Mona Finkelman, she was a leader at City Opera for many, many years and sang all over the place and worked with the best. And she would always tell me, this was as a high school student, heart on fire, head on ice.
Heart on
But when
fire.
you're in the studio,
Yeah.
like when you're in this, like now, I that's what I do when I perform. I just become the score. I don't think about it. I don't think Mozart wrote this at this period of life. It just becomes. It just becomes.
Right.
And it's that, and it shifts as you change. As we go through different things in our lives. I remember conducting the Verdi Requiem at different times, like 4 or 5 times, and each time is like I listen to it, my tempi are slightly different. I think about them differently. I think it's like looking at a great Renaissance painting. Every angle you look at it changes the perception of the work. I think we're constantly like that, looking at that painting in different ways.
It's so true. And the technique is the vehicle. So you can use your head, you should use your head for that part. I the studio, really has its place, its purpose, its focus, and that's how you drive. That's what gives you the freedom to be artistic. Without it, you can't say what you want to say. But when you walk on that stage, you can't be thinking of all of those things.
I tell my students,
You know?
if there's a part you haven't practiced or a technical phrase you haven't worked out, that will come out in the performance. That's why we have that.
That's right. That's right. Right. I always say that the technique, it's the choreography. I mean, if you don't know if your muscles don't know what to do and when to do it, then you're basically, kind of doing a Hail Mary when you go out on stage, right?
And
And that's
when the
terrifying.
energy, when the adrenaline hits, and you have an audience in front of you,
Yeah.
you need to have your technique ready and serviceable. It's like having like a car with no engine, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or if your engine seizes up when you're driving, right? If you don't put the oil in it,
That's happened to me before in the past.
When the light goes on, you're supposed to check, I think. Yeah.
Find a good teacher and mentor, and listen carefully and work over the years. And I always tell all of my young people that I work with, and I love to do it, that a musical career is a marathon, not a sprint. Just keep on growing over time and to keep on learning. And I love be curious, get out there, explore.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? You can't cut corners. You can't cut corners, and you cannot afford mediocrity because you'll pay for it, you know. And there are a lot of people that are born with some kind of facility, some kind of instrument that they use that causes people to not question the way that they use it. But that is not longevity. And then you also deny yourself the journey, which I think it's amazing, it's difficult, it's the best and the worst, right? But if you want your instrument to last forever, you have to invest in it. And the same goes for your artistry. You always keep exploring, you have to always keep understanding. We can't ever know everything. There's always a language that we can study. There's always, you know, an inflection in a word, the way that we form a consonant, the way that we taste a vowel. There's always something, right?
Always that next level to achieve. And I think that the really good artists I've worked with over my career, like yourself, you know, people who are always exploring, I'm always fired up by their energy. That's what I love about being a conductor is I work with so many different people, and I work with so many, from the singers to the orchestra to the members of the choirs I work with. They feed off that energy, and that everyone's got their unique take on the music, and then a conductor synthesizes that take and we work together to make this really wonderful product. It's what I miss the most in this time of COVID is that kind of connection.
There is that connection and also that energy. You know, a lot of audience members might not know that we on the stage rely on their energy. That's part of the artistic experience for us. That fuels us. And I realized, you know, the other day I was thinking about, I don't know, I was remembering some concert, and, you know, you see all the people. People think, oh, well, nobody notices what goes on in the audience. No, I notice everything. And I see them, and I feel them, you know, and I love them, and I need that. And I think we're so denied that part of the equation right now. You know, we're creating our art, and we're just doing it in a totally different way. But I think we're all feeling that lack of energy, that lack of human connection.
So tell me what it's like to now being a university professor at the University of Hawaii. Mm-hmm. How did you have to change your practice as a voice teacher and an academic as the COVID virus and the epidemic hit your neck of the woods?
Mm-hmm. Well, it was an interesting semester in the spring. Moving lessons to online was a little bit the least of my worries, because I do my own voice lessons online with Andrea. I live here in Hawaii. She lives in New York City, and I travel there a couple of times a year, and she knows my voice really, really well. Even if she didn't, she would know. She's a magician, as we established last week when she was on your show.
We call her the voice whisperer.
Yes, I always say I call her the magician. Because I think that she's magic. Truthfully, though, it isn't that she's a magician at all, it's that she's brilliant. So I'm just throwing that out there. Is one of the only voice teachers that I've seen or really witnessed for so many people absolutely creating an individual voice. And absolutely taking an instrument, finding out what it does best, and working that. And it's
Did I tell
incredible.
You how I met Andrea? I mean, I met her indirectly through just her reputation and through her students. I was doing auditions for Amore Opera at the time. I was conducting Bohème, I believe, with them, or something. And I heard about 100 young singers from New York City. You know, just it's a cattle call of young singers singing La Bohème arias. It was interesting, and every time I heard, I didn't know the name, but every time I heard one of those singers, they all had something to say that was totally different, but I loved it. And I'm like, I don't know who this person is, but it's fascinating. And then one of my dear friends, Christina Major, one of my best friends, she started studying with this person who I assumed was a 90-year-old Italian person. You know, like I said, I thought you were Yoda. So we always laugh about that. But and then I started working with Peter Ransman, the agent, and they're very close, of course. And but got to know her personally. And I'm fascinated by voice teachers like yourself. The really good voice teachers are just fascinating to me because to watch how they take. I love teachers who they don't have like a cookie cutter approach to training singers. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing is she has a very unique way of getting in the larynx and just kind of getting in the individual singer. And a lot of singers she's worked with had serious technical problems before, and she's able to overcome and start and find things they didn't even know they had, which was always impressive to me.
Right. Right. I always tell my students that, I have no shame. I'll try anything to get. And that requires a tremendous amount of trust because, we might be going in this direction. I say, you know what, let's take a second and let's just go this way for a second and see what happens, So I always tell my students, you really have to trust your voice teacher 100%. And I tell them, and especially if they're new, you need to be able to trust me 100% with your voice. And if you don't, that's okay, but then I'm not the teacher for you because you can't go on the journey if you're constantly questioning. And the biggest mistake that I see in young singers is not trusting. And I'm not saying don't learn from everybody. I think you can learn from everybody, but you have to have that one person whose best interest 100% is you.
Absolutely.
They have nothing to gain except for your vocal health.
Getting to watch you in the studio was really enlightening when I was in Hawaii at the University of Hawaii, to watch you work with your students and the connection that it's such a seamless connection between you and your students, how you just kind of dig in there and get them to try new things and open up. And I was very impressed to watch you work with students. I think I learned a lot watching you work with those young people.
Thank you. I think, I have no hesitation. I always say getting in there with a knife and fork to fix a problem. But university teaching is also interesting because there has to be an arc, right? Because there is an end to the journey in the university, and it culminates in a public recital. So you must layer in a shift in focus at a certain point. When you're right before a recital, you're not building a technique, hopefully. You're giving notes, you're giving reminders, but artistry cannot be separated from technique. And we talk, we have a lot of discussions about the role of the voice teacher and the role of the coach. I don't have a coach for my students. I bring people in, but, for me, the most important thing next to their solid technique is that they say something. Because if you get up and you sing and you make a pretty sound, I don't really care. Make me feel something. Say something. Make me have a reaction other than boredom.
Having worked with you personally as a singer and an artist, you always have something to say. You're just, even just speaking together on here, I can just say you've got this burning desire to communicate, and that's the most important thing any singer can learn is to have that depth of something to say. I'll forgive a few technical things here and there, but no one forgives a boring performance.
Thank you for saying that. And I have my challenge as a young singer was always technique based because I always wanted to just let it go and do these artistic things and I always had very patient teachers who said, well, it'll be more effective actually if you just do it this way. So I really think that you can't completely dismiss artistry, but there is a point where you have to be willing to just focus on the instrument and say, okay, why isn't this working right here? How do I get from here to here? How do I take what this person's telling me so that I can get what I want here? And I think kind of just following through on the discussion that we started about last semester, as if that's not hard enough. And then you shift so that you're not in person. The emotional crisis of everything that happened, you know, that was the biggest challenge, because there were some moments where, and I was preparing 5 students for degree recitals, 2 graduate students, 3 seniors. And each one of them had different challenges. And we did everything online, and then finally when it was time for the recital, and the recital hall is large, it's almost 400, so it was safe. It was the pianist, the singer, me, and a camera, right? Virtual. But the biggest obstacle was for people to accept that they were experiencing trauma, because they couldn't always name it. And the way that that would manifest, for a lot of my students, they would forget words that they normally wouldn't forget. They would make musical mistakes that they wouldn't normally forget. They're exhibiting all of these symptoms of anxiety, but they can't name it because they don't know what it is. So for me as a teacher, to have to usher them through this, that was a big challenge.
I desperately miss my musical communities, my choirs at the university level, my orchestra, my colleagues. I mean, seeing my colleagues on a Zoom call is great, and that's, I saw I had a meeting today, and it's much,
Right.
but it's not the same as, I miss that being in the same room, the body language, just the variety of different personality traits even on a faculty. I mean, things I never thought I'd miss, I miss desperately.
Yeah. Right.
And I think we're all processing
Yeah.
that grief, that stress, that heartache, in different ways.
Right. And our conversation for the fall isn't how do we teach them? We know how to teach them. We can do that in any format. How do we keep them engaged? How do we keep them excited? How do we keep them connected? That's our challenge.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to be as personal as possible. I teach a lecture course, a survey lecture of Western music, and with 37 people in the class, I love to just talk to them. What music do you like? Try to make a way to non-majors, make classical music relevant. I really loved the class. It was something I had never taught before. They asked me to teach, and I wound up loving it. And a couple of my students came to New York City to see some of the performances I was doing, and they'd never been to an opera before, but they got to see me do various arias. They just this is such great music, and to see that growth in a person who's never been there before was something I'll never forget, and I miss that right now. I miss the fact that I can't engage in that way right now.
I do too, and I think that one of the things that's carrying me through in a way, or one of the things that carried me through in the spring was my students, and I found that the only thing that really helped was to let them know that I felt the exact same way, and that I was struggling with the exact same things, and we've all, we've changed. If this interview were I'd probably be dressed up. I would look very, we've all become COVID casual, and I'm teaching lessons in t-shirt and jeans, and I'm exposing a lot more of my natural surroundings. They all know what my apartment looks like, and it's vulnerable. You lose that layer of protection, but wow, if it helps them to feel more comfortable, it helps them to know you're human too. You also wear t-shirts. You also live in a place, it's okay, I think.
Well, I've got a t-shirt for you. We've got a Musical Matters t-shirt we're going to send you after the show.
Fabulous. I can't wait.
You let me know your new address. We'll
send
that over. But thank you so much.
Perfect.
So anything else, what do you, when you get back to performing, what do you think is going to do for performing when we're able to start performing again? I know we lost a Mozart Requiem we were supposed to do together, and
we did.
So what are you looking forward to when we return back to the performing again?
It's such a unique way of having emotions and having experiences, and for me, it's the most genuine way that I can express my feelings or even process feelings. It's very cathartic, it's therapeutic, but also it's the greatest gift that I can give to my audience as well. Um, so I'm really looking forward personally to experiencing it, but also to being able to gifting that again and sharing that with anyone who cares to receive it.
It's a beautiful gift,
honest.
certainly, and I hope you get back to it. I hope we all get back to it soon. Have you been working on any virtual projects in this time period?
Nope, I haven't done any at all. I I have been singing um, from here and there. I had a lesson. I promise I'll call for. I promise I'll call soon for another one. I have kept going, and I have kept singing. It has mostly been for myself.
That's so important. It's so important.
Yeah, and I've kept working, and I've kept going forward, but it really is balanced because there's a difference for me if I'm standing and I'm really focusing and I'm fixing, or if I'm sitting at my piano and playing through, I don't know, some song I've never sung before just to sing it for myself. So they're different. So I'm trying to feed my need as a singer, but also my need as a musician, because I don't have those virtual projects going on.
Yeah, we have to feed our souls. It's for a couple weeks. I literally, I did my teaching, but I stopped my studying. As I was supposed, it was this summer I was supposed to be conducting in Vienna and Prague, some really big projects I've been working for years. They all fell down. They all fell apart.
Yeah.
So I just kind of
Yeah.
took a couple weeks off. I just said, I started doing yard work and doing other things for a while, and then I said, then I delved myself into the virtual scene because I said, there's probably going to be a need for that, and here we are as I'm surrounded by virtual projects 15, 20 hours a week now, and getting ready to apply that to the higher education ensembles that I serve. It's going to be a very interesting transition.
Well, I'm sure you and I will talk about it a lot in the process and trade ideas.
I imagine it's going to be constantly evolving too.
I think so. I mean, I think what we all know and understand is that this situation changes, and you can only plan to not plan. And we're just in a constant state of flux. I was supposed to be in Italy right now. I was going to be there all summer. I had a huge trip to New York City planned, starting with you. Life changed. Life gave up. The world is on fire. We have really huge issues to deal with.
Certainly
in
do.
the music field, in the world. And it just, one of my friends said that the world is on fire, and that's what it feels like. And we have to somehow figure out. There's a beautiful, beautiful saying in Hawaiian, imua. Imua means to move forward. And we have to imua, because what's the option? What's the alternative, right, if we don't?
I think us artists have to find ways to provide healing, to provide comfort in these times. That's the role of the arts, is to unite, inspire, it's to educate and inform. And I think that like you, I, and all the communities we serve, I think that's so important in this time when there's such division and discord, is to find some of that consonance and to do what we can individually and as our larger groups.
I agree. And we have to remember, in academia, we are training future citizens of the world. And so we have to model. We need to model, right? And we need to model grace, and we need to model excellence. And we can't just give up. And we can't just say, well, this is online, so I can only do so much. We have to
that
keep
attitude
asking
doesn't
questions.
exist, right? I know. Certainly for you, meeting you and getting to know you, that would never cross your mind. You are an energy person, and you're an innovator, and you have such a great personality and energy. So I applaud you. Keep up the great work. Keep on inspiring those singers. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you for joining us on Music Matters 2020. If you like the show, please like this video, please subscribe below, and hit the bell for the most up-to-date information on upcoming guests and topics. This coming Thursday at 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, we have a wonderful sitar player who does overtone singing, Neil Murgai. And thank you so much for joining us. You can see our complete listing of our library of past episodes and our upcoming events on our website at www.jasontramm.com. And you can support the show on patreon.com/mm2020. Thank you so much, and remember, keep music alive.
We